Tonight, we travel not to the halls of warriors or kings, but to a quiet coastal village, where the wind carries salt, and each hour moves gently with the sea. You'll spend a peaceful day with Sigrid and her little brother Bjorn, tending the fire, gathering herbs, listening to stories, and falling asleep beneath a turf roof, with the stars above. This is a slow story, one without battles, without urgency. Only warmth, breath, and time. Let it lull you, hold you, and carry you into rest. You don't need to stay awake, just stay close. And if this quiet journey brings you peace tonight, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more calm, forgotten histories, told slow, with love. A slow, quiet beginning to a new day in a coastal Viking village, told through the eyes of Sigrid and her brother Bjorn. It is still dark when the hearth stirs. Long before the gulls begin their morning cries and before any footsteps are heard outside, a low, steady breath of wind brushes over the thatched rooftops of the village. Inside one small turf-roofed longhouse, near the edge of the bay, the fire has not quite gone out. Its embers glow a deep orange beneath the grey ash. Smoke trails thinly upward into the rafters, then out through the smoke hole above. The air is cool, cool in the way that lingers inside your bones before the day begins. And under a rough wool blanket on a raised wooden bed, a teenage girl opens her eyes. Sigrid blinks slowly. She doesn't sit up just yet. She listens first. The sounds of early morning are always the same, familiar, but never dull. A few drips of melting frost tapping the clay pot by the doorway. The soft shifting of wool blankets from her younger brother's bed across the room. The sea, never fully silent, breathing quietly in the distance. She sits up at last. Her long auburn hair falls down over her shoulders, and she wraps her thick woolen cloak tighter around herself before stepping from the bed. The wood is cold beneath her feet. The house is simple, like most homes in their village. One main room, with low wooden walls lined with shelves and woven baskets. The beds are along the sides, carved simply from pine and covered in straw mattresses and sheepskins. A table at the center, a few stools. Everything smells faintly of salt, smoke, and dried herbs. She crosses to the hearth and kneels beside it. With practiced hands, she stirs the ash gently, revealing the live coals beneath. She adds a small bundle of dry moss and bark, blows softly, and feeds it slivers of kindling. The fire flickers back to life slowly. Not with urgency, but with familiarity. A friend returning. Her fingers move easily, as if remembering 100 mornings before. She hangs the iron pot from the hook above the fire, pours in a little water from the clay jug, and drops in a handful of dried grain. Breakfast will come slowly, just like the sun Bjorn stirs behind her. A rustle of blanket, a sleepy sigh. She doesn't speak, not yet. She knows he will wake on his own when the scent of warm porridge fills the air. Instead, she rises and opens the wooden door. The air outside is sharp and damp, a breath of salt and fog. The sky is the faintest shade of grey-blue, and the stars are beginning to fade. The village is still asleep. Only a faint curl of smoke rises from a neighboring house. A dog barks once, far off, then goes quiet again. She walks softly to the edge of the small path beside their home. It leads down through wet grass toward the shore. The tide is low, seaweed glistens along the rocks. The boats, pulled up on land, rest gently on the pebbled beach. Sigrid squats near the woodpile, selects a few larger pieces, and cradles them in her arms. She pauses. The sea wind brushes her hair across her face. She breathes in slowly. Back inside, the warmth is returning. The fire crackles softly now, and the porridge thickens in the pot. Bjorn sits on his bed, rubbing his eyes. He is small for his age, perhaps 7 or 8 winters old, and his pale blonde hair is tousled wildly from sleep. Is it morning? He mumbles. Sigrid nods. Just. She sets a bowl and wooden spoon on the table, ladles out a portion for him, and then another for herself. She adds a drizzle of honey from a small clay pot, a luxury saved from trade 2 weeks past. Bjorn grins sleepily at the taste. Their mother emerges next. Her face is lined but kind. She carries a woven basket with a spindle and flax thread tucked inside. They eat quietly. There is no need for conversation, only the clink of wooden spoons and the hiss of porridge as it cools. Outside, the first true light begins to touch the tops of the roofs. The sea reflects it in pale silver streaks. After breakfast, Sigrid begins her chores. She fetches a small bucket from beside the door and heads toward the communal well. Along the way, she passes other homes, smoke rising now, others stirring. An old woman kneels to sweep her threshold with a birch broom. A man drags a net over his shoulder toward the boats. The village is alive again. The well is a simple wooden structure, a bucket on a rope, a crank to lower and lift. Sigrid hauls up the cold water with both hands, careful not to spill. She dips her fingers in to test it. Then, another sound, soft footsteps behind her. Bjorn has followed, carrying a bundle of kindling. He smiles at her through the mist. Mother says we'll mend nets today, he says. Sigrid nods. They do that often, when the weather is too uncertain for fishing. The wind has shifted, a cold breeze from the north, and the older men will likely stay ashore until it steadies. They return home together, and Sigrid sets the water down by the hearth while Bjorn stacks the kindling. Their father has not yet returned from the boathouse. He had gone before dawn to check the traps tied near the cove. She glances at the doorway, knowing he'll bring whatever fish the sea gave them today, if any. The sea is a giver and a taker both. But they do not fear it. They respect it. A little later, Sigrid kneels near the woven net laid out by the wall. She threads rough twine through a broken hole, fingers moving with care. Bjorn sits nearby, practicing knots on a length of rope. He struggles a little, but she helps him, showing where to loop and pull. Outside, the village is fully awake. The blacksmith's hammer rings faintly in the distance. A cartwheel creaks. Gulls call overhead. But inside the longhouse, all is calm. The morning has begun, and surpasses the first hour of the day in this quiet Viking coastal village. Not with battle cries or roaring ships, but with breath, wood smoke, ocean wind, and two siblings, learning their world one quiet morning at a time. The warmth has fully returned to the longhouse. Not the quick warmth of a blazing fire, but the slow, steady heat that radiates from well-tended embers. A comfort earned by early rising. The sky outside has changed. Where it was once blue-gray, it now blushes with pale gold. Strips of warm light sneak in through the cracks in the shutters, falling softly on the packed earth floor. Inside, Sigrid kneels again by the hearth. The porridge from earlier has thickened, and the pot's contents are still warm. She stirs it gently and adds a little water to loosen the mixture. Nearby, Bjorn sits cross-legged with a piece of driftwood in his hands, idly tracing the ridges with his thumb. His legs swing slightly beneath his woolen tunic, too short from last spring, but still serviceable. He's awake now, not just blinking sleep from his eyes, but fully alert, curious. The quiet time between waking and working. Their mother returns from the henhouse just outside. She steps in through the wooden door, her wool cloak damp with dew. In her hands, she carries a small basket, inside, 4 brown eggs nestled in straw. Enough for the pot, she murmurs with a smile, setting them beside Sigrid. Sigrid cracks one carefully, then another, stirring them into the hot porridge with a carved wooden spoon. The steam carries a mild, earthy scent, grain, salt, and firewood. Bjorn tilts his head. Can I stir? She hands him the spoon. His hand is small and clumsy, but careful. The porridge bubbles gently, like a content sigh rising from the pot. Their mother has already begun preparing the bread, flat and round, pressed by hand. The dough was made the night before with coarse ground barley and a touch of wild yeast. She places the discs onto a flat iron pan and sets it atop a bed of embers. The smell of baking fills the small space, warm and grounding, familiar as breath. Their father's footsteps sound outside, heavy boots on damp stone. Bjorn looks up as the door creaks open. A gust of sea-scented air slips into the longhouse. Their father enters, tall and broad-shouldered, carrying a shallow basket made of willow. Inside lie 3 small silver fish, freshly gutted and glistening still. Not much, he says simply, setting them beside the hearth. Sigrid nods and takes the basket, placing it near the fire. Her mother will smoke them later, once the morning tasks are done. The family sits around the table now, a small, 3-legged wooden surface carved with swirling knot designs along the edges. Stools are brought forward, simple logs flattened at the top, each polished smooth by use. No one rushes. There's no pressing need to. The sea sets the rhythm here, and the sea cannot be hurried. Each bowl is filled with warm porridge and a piece of egg folded in. The flatbread is broken into pieces and passed around. Bjorn eats slowly, dipping his bread into the porridge and chewing with quiet satisfaction. There is no chatter, no morning rush. Only the muted sounds of eating, the faint creak of the beams above, and the occasional distant bark of a dog down by the shore. Their father finally speaks, voice low and calm. Wind's shifting. Might be storms from the east by tonight. Their mother nods, not surprised. We'll stay in, then. The drying rack needs mending. She glances at Sigrid, and the herbs must be sorted. Sigrid nods. I'll do it after the nets. Bjorn, still chewing, mumbles. Can I help with the drying rack? Their father smiles gently. We'll see if your hands are big enough this year. A quiet chuckle follows. Not much more is said. Words are used carefully here, not out of silence, but out of respect for silence. After breakfast, the bowls are rinsed with warm water from the pot and scrubbed with sand and cloth. Bjorn dries them with a strip of linen, humming a tune he half remembers from a feast last winter. Sigrid places the bowls back on the shelf above the hearth, next to the carved drinking horns and the small ceramic jar that holds dried juniper berries. She glances toward the window, not a pane of glass, but a simple wooden shutter cracked open slightly to let in the morning light. Outside, the village is awake. Smoke rises steadily now from many rooftops. 2 children run past, chasing a rag ball made of sheep's wool. A man walks by, pulling a small cart laden with firewood. Somewhere farther off, someone begins singing softly, a lullaby perhaps, or an old fishing song. The home begins to shift from stillness to motion. The hearth has done its duty, warmed the home, fed the family, held the center of the morning. Now the tasks of the day await. Sigrid folds back her cloak and ties her hair in a simple braid. Bjorn grabs a small bone-handled knife and tucks it into his belt, proud of the privilege. Their mother stands, placing the last flatbread onto a cloth and setting it aside for the evening meal. She sprinkles a handful of herbs onto the coals, dried heather and thyme, letting their soft scent rise and linger in the air. A blessing in scent, a cleansing. Before stepping outside, Sigrid pauses. She presses her hand to the frame of the door, not a ritual, not a prayer, just a habit. A silent thank you to the home that holds them. Bjorn is already ahead of her, darting out toward the path that leads to the cove. Their mother stays behind for now, tending to the herbs, lifting a corner of the roof hatch to let in more light. The fire continues to burn, low and steady. Its flame now just aglow, like a warm breath beneath the stones. And so breakfast ends. No rush, no clang, no bustle. Just heat and hands, steam and stories unspoken. A beginning to the middle. An ember that holds the memory of flame. The wooden latch lifts with a dull clunk. The door swings open slowly, and a cool gust of morning air brushes against Sigrid's cheeks. She steps outside with Bjorn just behind her, tugging his cloak over his shoulders. The wool itches, but he says nothing. He likes the weight of it, it makes him feel grown. Their boots leave soft imprints in the damp earth as they begin walking the narrow path that winds through their small village toward the shore. The day is awake, but not yet busy. It stirs, rather than rushes. The grass is slick with dew, and the wooden fence posts are dark with moisture. Crows caw from the trees above the fields. A thin stream of smoke rises from each house, curling into the air like ribbons. The village smells of salt and peat and pine, of things burned slowly and used completely. They pass an old woman crouched outside her doorway, spreading fish skins on a flat rock. Her hands are stained from dyeing wool, fingertips a deep brownish red from alder bark. Morning, she mutters with a nod. Sigrid smiles and offers a quiet, good morning, Ingrid. Bjorn waves, and the old woman narrows her eyes playfully. Off to mend the sea. Bjorn grins. We'll try. The homes they pass are built like their own, wooden frames packed with turf, smoke holes in the roof, rounded corners to cut the wind. Between the houses are footpaths and chicken coops, clay pots resting by doors, a child squatting by a puddle tracing circles with a stick. No stone walls, no fences, just the open weaving of life, people, land, sea. The air becomes sharper the closer they get to the water. It smells of seaweed and brine, like something that has always existed. The grass gives way to sand. The shore unfolds before them, a gentle crescent of wet pebbles, with half a dozen small boats pulled up along the bank. Ropes lie coiled in heaps. Fish traps rest on racks, dripping with last night's tide. Wooden posts, half buried in sand, support baskets filled with drying shells and twine. Sigrid walks straight to a bundle of nets left draped across 2 wooden poles. The hemp cords are stiff and tangled in places. Some of the loops have frayed where sharp stones sliced them open. Bjorn squats beside a trap made from willow reeds, poking his finger through the slits. This one's broken, he announces solemnly. Sigrid nods. We'll fix it later. Start with this line. She hands him a smaller net, his to mend. It was his task last spring and will be again this year. He sits cross-legged and begins carefully threading a new length of cord through the holes. His brow furrows, and his tongue peeks out as he concentrates. Sigrid turns to her own work. With a bone needle the length of her palm, she threads thick twine through the weave of the netting. Her fingers are practiced. Each motion is slow, rhythmic, pinch, pull, tighten, repeat. The net is heavy and smells of salt and fish and damp wood. The sea speaks behind them, never shouting, only whispering. The tide has turned. Waves lap softly against the rocks. Somewhere down the beach, a gull lands and picks at a crab shell. A man walks by carrying 2 oars slung over his shoulder. He's heading toward the larger of the boats. "Morning, Sigrid," he calls. "Good day, Leif," she replies. He nods to Bjorn. "Helping again?" Bjorn looks up and nods proudly. "Good lad," Leif says, walking on. They pause once, when the sun fully crests the ridge to the east. The light pours across the water, turning it to molten silver. Everything glows: the ropes, the driftwood, Sigrid's braid, the curve of Bjorn's cheek. He squints into the sun and says softly, "The sea looks warm." Sigrid smiles. "It only looks that way." They return to work. Each stitch is like breath. Each knot a memory handed down. The nets were woven by mothers and daughters before her, the same patterns, the same fixes, year after year. It is not exciting, but it is beautiful. Nearby, someone begins singing, a low tune in Old Norse, full of long vowels and pauses. It drifts across the shore like fog. Sigrid doesn't look up. She knows the voice, Runa, the village's oldest weaver. The song is about the sea and memory, and how both return again and again. By midday, their hands are tired and the nets are coiled in piles. Sigrid stretches her arms, wiping her fingers on her cloak. Bjorn stands and rubs his knees. "My back hurts," he complains. She laughs softly. "That means you're doing it right." He scowls, but then grins. Before leaving, they walk toward the edge of the rocks where the water breaks in foamy waves. Sigrid picks up a smooth piece of driftwood and inspects it, perhaps good for carving a spoon. Bjorn finds a shell shaped like a spiral and holds it up to his ear. "I can hear it," he whispers. Sigrid tilts her head. "The sea," he nods solemnly. "It's calling someone." They sit for a moment on the rocks, just listening. To the water, to the wind, to the hush that settles over places where land meets salt. They rise at last and begin the walk back home. The nets are finished. The tide has climbed higher. And the rest of the day waits ahead, with weaving, wood smoke, and stories yet to be told. The sun now hangs higher in the sky, though its warmth is gentle here by the sea. No fierce midday blaze, just a pale gold light slanting through the shuttered window. Inside the longhouse, it dances across the packed earth floor and wooden beams, catching on threads of dust that drift silently in the air. Sigrid stands beside the loom. It is tall, nearly as high as the doorframe, and leans slightly against the wall. The frame is made of pine, smooth from years of use, with pegs driven deep to hold the threads taut. She runs her hand across the warp, vertical threads strung tightly from top to bottom. They are coarse but even, made from sheep's wool she and her mother spun through the long winter nights. The weft, the horizontal threads, waits in a basket nearby, dyed soft brown with alder bark and lichen. Bjorn sits across the room near the hearth, legs tucked under him, cradling a small block of driftwood. His father kneels beside him, guiding his hands as he carves. The blade he uses is short and sharp, worn smooth from years of sharpening on river stones. "Not like that," his father says gently. "Let the knife do the work. Keep your wrist steady." Bjorn nods, tongue between his teeth in concentration. Shavings fall in soft curls onto the floor. Bit by bit, the shape of a tiny boat begins to emerge. Sigrid begins weaving. With each pass, she lifts one set of threads with the heddle rod, then slides the shuttle through, drawing it across. She pulls the beater bar forward, pressing the wool tight. The sound is gentle and rhythmic. Creak, slide, thump. Creak, slide, thump. She repeats the pattern slowly, her breath sinking with the motion. The cloth takes shape 1 inch at a time, growing from the bottom of the frame like something living. Weaving is not hard work, but it demands attention and a certain stillness. It is the kind of task that lets the mind wander while the hands remain grounded. As she works, her thoughts drift. She thinks of the herb bundles hanging above the fire, nearly dry now. She thinks of the nets they mended, and whether the tide will bring more fish tonight. She thinks of her mother, who once sat at this loom and taught her to thread the shuttle with care, not haste. Bjorn looks up from his carving. He holds the half-shaped boat up to the light. It's crooked. His father tilts his head. The sea won't mind. Bjorn laughs, and so does Sigrid. Their mother steps into the room, wiping her hands on a linen cloth. She moves slowly but with purpose, like someone who knows every inch of the house by heart. She kneels beside Sigrid and inspects the weaving. Good spacing, she murmurs, nodding. You see how the weft curves here? Add more tension. Sigrid adjusts the rod. Her mother watches, then stands again and returns to her herbs. The smell of thyme and lavender fills the room. Bjorn now works on the boat's hull, rounding the edges. His father has stepped outside, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his knife. He pauses to listen. The loom creaks behind him. The wind hums through the cracks in the door. A bird calls once, far away, then silence again. He begins to hum a little tune, one he remembers from a summer feast, about a bear who stole a fisherman's boots. His voice is soft, and the rhythm steady, matching the scrape of his knife. Sigrid's cloth grows longer. It is meant for a new tunic, not hers, but Bjorn's. He's outgrown his again, and winter will not wait. The wool is scratchy, but warm. The color is simple, brown with hints of gray, but she plans to add a blue band near the hem, if there's time. Her fingers ache slightly now, but she keeps going. Weaving is not rushed. It is never rushed. She stops after a time and wipes her brow. Her braid has loosened, strands falling around her face. Bjorn looks up and holds out his boat. It floats now, he declares. Sigrid smiles. We'll test it later in the trough. He nods seriously. I want to carve a sail next. Their mother returns to the hearth and adds a handful of dried herbs to a clay pot. She pours in water and sets it over the coals. A fragrant steam begins to rise, mint and juniper. It will help your cough, she says, though no one has coughed yet. It's simply something she always says. Outside, the wind picks up. A shutter rattles gently, and the scent of sea air slips into the room. Sigrid stretches, then sets down her shuttle. She covers the cloth with a wool sheet to keep dust away. Bjorn stands, boat in hand, and walks toward the water trough just outside. Sigrid follows. The trough is a long wooden box, filled from the rain barrel nearby. Its sides are green with algae, and tiny insects skim the surface. Bjorn lowers the boat carefully. It wobbles, then floats. He grins. Sigrid kneels beside him and watches it drift. No wind, no sail, just the shape of wood on water. Still, it moves. Back inside, their mother stirs the pot and ladles the tea into clay cups. She sets one by the hearth for each of them. They sip slowly, the mint sharp but soothing. The room smells like wool and wood and warm herbs. Sigrid leans back against the wall and closes her eyes for a moment. Bjorn lies on his stomach, tracing patterns into the dust with a stick. No one speaks. No one needs to. And in that silence, filled only with small sounds, the creak of the loom, the scratch of a knife, the sigh of boiling tea, the world holds still. This is the rhythm of home. Of a life not marked by clocks, but by cloth, carving, and quiet hands. By midday, the light has changed. No longer golden, it leans paler, a soft grey falling through the gaps in the roof where daylight seeps in like breath. The air in the longhouse is warm, but not stifling. It holds the soft scent of herbs, firewood, and wool, the smell of comfort and of home. The loom stands silent now, Sigrid's weaving tucked away beneath a cloth. Bjorn's wooden boat rests beside his bed, half sanded, with a small notch carved to one side where he plans to fix a sail. The room, like the sea outside, has grown still for a while, waiting for food. Sigrid crouches at the hearth and stirs a pot suspended above the embers. Inside, barley porridge simmers thickly, flecked with shreds of dried carrot and crushed juniper. Her mother steps behind her, handing her a small handful of dried berries. Just at the end, she says, "Not before, or they'll turn bitter." Sigrid nods, adds them carefully, and watches as they sink below the surface and swell, dark and round. Bjorn kneels nearby, poking at a piece of firewood with a stick. He hasn't spoken for a while. There's a certain calm that settles over him when food is near, not hunger, exactly, but anticipation. A quiet agreement between the stomach and the soul. Their father enters just then, pushing open the heavy door with one shoulder. He carries a small clay jar in his hand, closed with waxed cloth. "Brought it from Ingrid," he says, handing it to his wife. She peels it back and smells it. Honey, not much, only a few spoonfuls, but enough for sweetness. Bjorn's eyes light up. The table is cleared of dust with a folded cloth. Sigrid sets down 4 wooden bowls, each carved from a single knot of ash. The grain of the wood swirls like the sea, marked by time and fire. Spoons are passed, horn-handled, with wide, shallow scoops. The pot is lifted from the hearth and placed in the center. Steam curls upward into the low air. Everyone sits, not with ceremony, but with ease. This is not a feast. It is a meal, a moment. Each bowl is filled, slowly, carefully. One for father, one for mother, one for Bjorn, who eyes the berries with delight, and one for Sigrid, who ladles hers last. The porridge is thick, with the faintest sheen of oil across the top. It smells of smoke and barley, of earth and fire. Her mother adds a spoonful of honey to each bowl. Bjorn licks his spoon before it even touches the food. They eat in silence at first. Not an awkward silence, a peaceful one. The kind that wraps around people who know one another well enough not to need words. Spoons scrape gently against bowls. A log settles in the fire with a sigh. Outside, the wind rustles the turf roof, lifting the faint smell of the sea through the thatch. After a while, their father speaks, not loudly, just enough to be heard. I dreamed of a bear last night. Sigrid glances up. Bjorn looks wide-eyed. What kind of bear? A white one, he replies, taking another spoonful. It stood on a boat in the harbor, looking up at the sky. That means something, Bjorn says, mouth full. Their mother raises an eyebrow, not unkindly. Everything means something, if you look long enough. Sigrid swallows and says, in dreams, white animals are usually omens. Her father smiles faintly. Good or bad, she shrugs. Depends if the bear was hungry. They chuckle softly. Bjorn says, I dreamed that my boat could fly. He gestures toward the carved piece of driftwood by the bed. It had wings, like a gull. And when I sat in it, it lifted off and flew across the fjord. His mother smiles. Then your carving is strong. Sigrid teases, just don't try that with your next one. They continue eating. The porridge cools slowly, thickening more with every passing minute. Sigrid scrapes the sides of her bowl and watches the flame flicker beneath the hearth. It sways with each whisper of wind, almost as if breathing. Her father leans back and sets his spoon down. Do you remember, he says, the day the trader came with the silver comb? Her mother nods. He came in autumn, when the rowan turned red. He had a crow on his shoulder, adds Sigrid. It spoke, said, water, water, again and again. Bjorn frowns. Did it really speak? Sigrid looks at him seriously. Clear as your voice. Their mother smiles at the memory. She traded 2 tunics and a coil of rope for that comb. Sigrid still has it, though it lost 1 tooth last year. It's the only thing she owns that shines in the light. Bjorn leans against the table now, bowl empty. Do you think there'll be fish tonight? His father replies, if the net's held. The tide comes in early. We'll check again at dusk. Sigrid says nothing. She hopes so, not for hunger, they have enough, but for the rhythm. The sea gives, and they receive. It feels wrong when it doesn't. Her mother stands and begins gathering the bowls. Sigrid helps, rinsing each one in warm water from the bucket near the door. She dries them with a wool cloth and stacks them on the shelf above the hearth. Bjorn hums softly again, the same tune as before, about the bear and the boots. It's a lullaby in its own way. As the meal ends, the house settles back into stillness. The fire burns lower, the shutters creak faintly, the wind carries the scent of salt and heather through the beams. No one rushes to leave the table. It is enough just to sit. To breathe, to exist inside a moment softened by warmth, food, and closeness. And for a little while longer, they simply are. Together, the sun has passed its peak, though no one marks it with a bell or shadow stick. Time in the village flows with feeling, not numbers. And the feeling now is one of slow continuation. Afternoon. The hearth glows quietly behind them, the last of the meal cleared away. A gentle hum of wind presses through the door, smelling of wet grass and the open shore. Sigrid folds a woven cloth over a small wicker basket. Inside, 2 lightly smoked fish, still cold to the touch. She knots the cloth at the top and lifts it carefully. Bjorn waits by the door, pulling his boots on and tying him tightly. Where are we going first? He asks. To Runa's, then to the field. He nods, adjusting the wooden boat in his belt. He insists on bringing it everywhere today. It might want to see the herbs, he says, smiling. Sigrid only nods. She's used to his logic. They step outside into soft light. The wind has shifted again, no longer from the east, but from the north. It carries a slight chill, a reminder that autumn lingers just past the hills. The path through the village is well trodden, packed earth, rimmed with tufts of grass and moss. Here and there, chicken feathers float across the road. Wood smoke curls up from chimneys, carrying with it the smell of pine sap and peat. The sound of a hammer rings out steadily from the blacksmith's shelter, and a baby cries once from inside a nearby longhouse, then quiets again. They pass a woman kneeling to turn flax on a drying rack. She waves with a cloth-wrapped hand and says nothing. They nod back. No words needed. Afternoons speak for themselves. Runa's home is tucked at the far edge of the village, partly sunken into the hillside, with a roof grown over in moss and herbs. She's the oldest woman in the village, nearly blind, but sharp in all the ways that matter. She's outside today, sitting on a low stool with her back to the sun, weaving nettle fibers into cord. Sigrid approaches slowly. "Good day, Runa," she says softly. The old woman turns her head slightly. "I heard your steps halfway down the path. That boy of yours walks like a thunder god." Bjorn grins. "It's the boat's fault." Runa snorts. Sigrid kneels and offers the basket. 2 fish. Still fresh. "My mother sent them." Runa reaches out, her hands smooth and light, fingertips reading the shape of the basket. "Good weight. You'll take the honey, then?" Sigrid nods. Runa gestures behind her. "There, in the shade. Covered in beeswax cloth. Don't take the wrong jar. One of them is lard, and it doesn't go well with porridge." Bjorn snickers. Sigrid finds the honey, golden, thick, and warm from the sun. She lifts it with both hands and tucks it into her satchel. "Thank you." Runa only nods, returning to her thread. The walk to the fields is longer. They follow the creek that winds beyond the village, lined with willow trees and tall grass. Insects hum softly in the reeds. Dragonflies dart past in glimmers of green and gold. Sigrid carries a cloth pouch now, tied at her hip. It smells faintly of sage and crushed bark. Bjorn runs ahead and stops beside a patch of yarrow. "Is this one?" Sigrid catches up and kneels beside him. She fingers the plant gently, small white flowers, clustered, with feathered leaves. "Yes, but not too much. Just what we'll dry for salve." She plucks a few sprigs, careful not to tear the roots, and tucks them into the pouch. They move from patch to patch, gathering slowly. Not like harvesting, more like visiting. Each plant is greeted silently with a glance, touched, judged, and either accepted or left untouched. Wild thyme, tiny and fragrant. Meadowsweet, for fever. A few tender birch leaves, still pale green and curled. Bjorn points at every plant he doesn't recognize. "What's this?" "Dock leaf. For stings. And that one, cow parsley. But don't touch it, looks too close to the dangerous kind." His eyes widen. "Will it kill you?" "Not if you don't eat it," she says calmly. "Still, we don't risk it." They rest by the large stone near the stream. Sigrid leans back against the warm rock and watches the clouds slide across the sky like pulled wool. Bjorn floats his boat in the stream nearby, guiding it with a stick and muttering quietly to himself, a conversation between sailor and sea. The water glistens. The wind hushes the trees. Somewhere overhead, a bird circles once, then disappears behind a ridge. They begin the walk back with full pouches and quiet steps. The light has started to change again, softening, warming. Late afternoon now, shadows stretch across the path, and the village looks smaller in the distance, framed by the glow of sun on thatched roofs. As they return, neighbors are outside again. A man sharpens a spearhead beside his door. A group of children chase a hen through a patch of grass. A woman pours milk into a clay jar, then sets it into the earth to keep cool. The rhythm of life here does not rush. It folds into itself, like weaving, over and under, until the day becomes whole. They reach their home just as the light hits the top of the doorframe. Inside, the fire is low but not out. Their mother is sorting beans in a carved bowl. She looks up, smiles, and nods toward the satchel. "All of it." Sigrid opens the pouch and shows her. "Enough for tea, and balm, and some to dry." Bjorn adds, "And the boat didn't sink." She laughs softly. "Then it was a good errand." And so the herbs are hung, the honey jar set aside for later, and the door closed softly behind them. The village settles again. Afternoon fades, not sharply, but gently, like the light through linen, or the sound of wind across stone. And inside the longhouse, peace remains. The village begins to fold in on itself. Not suddenly, not like nightfall in stories, but gradually, with the slow certainty of something that has happened every day for centuries. Shadows stretch along the longhouse walls, reaching from one timber post to another like soft fingers. The hearth glows dimly, no longer for cooking, but for comfort. It needs tending now, not feeding. Sigrid kneels beside it, sleeves rolled, hands dusted with ash. She brushes out the cooled embers from the morning fire, what's left of breakfast, of warmth, of hours long gone. They are grey now, faintly sweet smelling, still whispering heat if touched too soon. Bjorn appears beside her, arms full of chopped wood. The pieces clack together gently, and a few small bits of bark fall onto the floor. Is this enough? She nods. Start with the thinner ones. He sets the bundle down with care and begins sorting the pieces, long ones to the side, dry splinters in a small pile near the hearth. Their mother steps into the room from outside, carrying a pouch of kindling wrapped in linen. She loosens the tie and spreads the contents near the fire, dry moss, curls of shaved wood, and the broken stem of a dried herb bundle. Sigrid arranges the fire thoughtfully, not just stacking logs, but building a space for breath. First the moss, then the curls of wood. 2 finger-length sticks form a triangle, the shape her mother taught her. The fire needs room to grow, she'd said once. Don't smother it with help. Bjorn watches, still, fascinated. He's seen this before, but never tires of it. It is like magic, but older. Like remembering something the world already knows. Their father enters then, his silhouette tall in the doorway, framed by the golden last light. Fire ready? He asks. Almost, Sigrid replies, striking flint to iron. A shower of sparks. Again, a bright click, then a faint wisp of smoke. The moss glows. A thread of fire unfurls, almost invisible, until it catches the shavings and flares softly to life. Bjorn's eyes widen, though he doesn't speak. Even he knows not to interrupt fire. The flame builds, slow and shy. It licks at the wood, cautious at first, then steadier. Not a roar, but a sigh. A rising warmth that fills the room with flicker and breath. The hearth is not just for heat. It is the heart of the home. Its light paints everything in motion, the walls, the woven mats, the curve of the ceiling beams. Sigrid's face glows amber, Bjorn's hair shines with gold. Their father's hands, scarred and large, catch the light like sculpted stone. Outside, the wind has stilled. The sea whispers far beyond, as if trying not to disturb the fire. Inside, there is only stillness and slow work. Their mother sets a kettle on the hook above the flames, not for food, but for tea. Herbs from earlier, crushed yarrow, mint, and a touch of dried sea buckthorn, steep gently in the water as it warms. The smell rises, sharp and earthy, like clean soil after rain. Sigrid sits now, legs tucked beneath her. Bjorn lies on his belly near the fire, his carved boat beside him. He pushes it slowly back and forth across a groove in the floor. Will we sail soon? He asks quietly. Not until the wind turns, says their father, who now sits with his back against the wall, sharpening a blade. And when it does, then we follow it. Bjorn nods as though this explains everything. The kettle hisses softly, steam rising in swirls. Their mother pours the tea into 4 mismatched cups, horn, clay, wood, and one carved from antler. Each is warmed before pouring, then passed hand to hand. They drink without words. The warmth runs through them like song. Like fire, but inside. After tea, their mother sets a few coals aside in a small pot, tomorrow's spark, kept warm in ash and clay. No matches, no flint if it can be helped. Only memory, passed from day to day. Bjorn watches, fascinated. Fire sleeps there, she nods. Like us, waiting to wake again. They sit together for a time. Not close, not touching, but held in the same space. The fire crackles softly. The kettle whistles again, though no one moves. Shadows shift across the ceiling. The walls darken gently, as if exhaling the day. Sigrid closes her eyes. She listens to the sound of her father's whetstone, slow and steady. To Bjorn's breath, which slows the longer he lies near the flame. To the wood settling, creaking once as it yields to heat. Night has not fallen yet, not fully, but the world has quieted. Outside, the sea lies still. The sky deepens. No stars yet, but they wait, behind the blue. Sigrid opens her eyes and watches the fire. It sways, bright and sure. She knows it will burn through the evening. That it will be fed with care. That it will sleep when they sleep. It does not hurry. Like them, it endures. Like them, it rests. Night has arrived, not all at once, but like a blanket being drawn slowly over the world. The last of the light fades from the sky, and the stars begin to blink into place, one by one. There is no lamp, no rush of brightness. Only the glow of the hearth, flickering steadily in the center of the longhouse. The room holds its breath. Time is not measured now, only felt. Bjorn lies curled on a woven mat, wrapped in a fur blanket, his head resting on one folded arm. The carved boat rests near his hand. Sigrid sits upright nearby, legs crossed, her back against the wall. She sips the last of her herbal tea, now lukewarm. The scent of dried mint and smoke lingers on her sleeve. Their mother gathers her knitting, though her hands barely move, and settles onto the bench beside the fire. Their father sits nearby, carving a smooth length of wood into something that doesn't yet have a name. The fire is the only light now. It dances across the walls, casting shadows that shift with every breath of flame. Sometimes they look like trees, sometimes animals. Once, the shadow of Sigrid's braid looks like a raven, wings outstretched. Bjorn stares into it, and softly, without prompting, he says, "Tell the one about the girl with the fish skin." Sigrid smiles faintly. "You always want that one. I like the ending." Their mother nods. "Then listen." And so she begins. Her voice is quiet, steady, not dramatic, not rushed. The kind of voice that you must lean into. The kind that wraps around you slowly. Long ago, on a rocky shore not unlike ours, there lived a girl who found a bundle of fish skins washed up by the tide. No one knew where they came from. They shimmered like the moon, and smelled of salt and storms. Bjorn's eyes close, but he is not asleep. He listens with the whole of himself. Sigrid watches her mother speak. She knows this story by heart. Has heard it since she was small, when her fingers were still too short to tie knots, and her feet too slow for errands. But she still listens, not for the plot, but for the rhythm. For the way the voice changes on certain lines. For the way the fire crackles just as the fish skin girl dives into the sea. And some say she still swims there, her mother says softly, nearing the end. Where the waves break near the rocks. If you watch closely, just at twilight, you might see a shimmer that doesn't belong. Bjorn exhales slowly. Did she leave because she was lonely? Maybe, Sigrid answers. Or maybe she just remembered who she was. There is silence for a while after the story ends. Not heavy, just full. The fire shifts again. A new log pops, sending sparks spiraling upward into the chimney hole above. Their father clears his throat. "My turn," he says. Bjorn grins. He likes his father's stories best. They always start slow, like rowing through mist, and end with a surprise. "When I was your age," he begins, "I went up the hill past the old stones. The ones they say were left by giants, before the snow remembered how to fall." Sigrid leans forward. She doesn't know this one. He speaks of a nighttime walk, of stones that glowed faintly under the moon, and of a fox who watched him from a distance, not moving, not blinking. "And when I turned to leave," he says, "it spoke. Not in words, but in thought. Like thunder in your chest. And it said, everything that was, still is. Just deeper down." Bjorn shivers, delighted. Was it a god, or a spirit? Their mother says, eyes half closed. Or a memory, Sigrid murmurs. Outside, a gust of wind stirs the turf roof, and a puff of ash shifts in the hearth. The fire flares briefly, then softens again. The longhouse feels like the inside of a story now, warm, enclosed, filled with voices and light. Not loud voices, never loud, but clear, and old. Bjorn sits up suddenly. "Can I tell one?" His parents nod. He sits cross-legged and takes a deep breath. There once was a little boat carved from a tree struck by lightning. And when the moon was full, it would glow, just a little. One night, it drifted out to sea, without a sailor, without a rope. And it didn't stop sailing, not even when the stars turned their backs. Sigrid nods. "That's a good one." Bjorn beams. "I made it up." The stories fade into silence after that. No more are needed. They've filled the room like steam fills a kettle, gently, until everything feels softened by memory. The fire dies down now. Just glowing coals, pulsing softly, like a heartbeat. Their mother folds her knitting and sets it aside. Their father lays his carving down and stretches. Bjorn's head lowers to the mat. This time, he doesn't speak. Sigrid wraps a second fur around his shoulders. He is already slipping into the same world they just spoke of, where foxes speak and boats glow, where girls become fish, and stones remember giants. Sigrid remains awake a little longer. She watches the shadows on the ceiling. They flicker, like dances, or spirits, or breath. She thinks of the stories she hasn't told yet, of the ones she's still writing in her head, of the ones she might never speak aloud, but carry with her always. And then, quietly, like the closing of a book, she lets her eyes fall shut. The night holds the house. And the fire, though dim, still remembers how to glow. The coals in the hearth no longer flame. They glow, soft, red, steady, breathing, almost, as if the fire, too, has lain down to rest. Above, the roof is silent. No more shifting wind, only the muffled hush of moss and turf, thick and heavy with night. It presses out the world, not in a way that smothers, but in a way that protects. Inside the longhouse, no one speaks. There is no need. Words belong to the day. The night asks only for stillness. Bjorn lies curled like a cat beneath a fur blanket. His carved boat rests beside him, one hand loosely draped across it, as if he has sailed with it into sleep. His breathing is slow, measured, safe. He does not dream yet, or if he does, the dreams are soft and shapeless. Not stories, not adventures, just colors and warmth and the memory of voices. Sigrid lies nearby, also wrapped in fur, but facing the ceiling. The rafters above fade into darkness, but she knows their shape by heart. Every beam, every knot, every spider thread spun between posts. She listens to the room, the quiet pop of a coal, the sigh of her mother as she turns under her blanket, the faint scratching of a mouse somewhere near the grain barrel. All familiar, all comforting. Sigrid closes her eyes and lets her thoughts drift. She doesn't sleep right away. First, she lets go of the day, the errands, the sound of the loom, the stories, the weight of the world pressing gently on her shoulders. She feels her breath in her chest, not forced, not counted. Just there, rising, falling, like waves, like the wind, like time, if it were kind. Across the room, her father's snore rumbles once and then settles into rhythm. Her mother murmurs something, half a word, half a dream, and then falls still. The longhouse holds them all in a deep hush. Not silence, there is no such thing here, but something better, stillness. Outside, the stars stretch across the sky like cold silver wool. They do not blink here, only shine. Their light doesn't reach the earth in brightness, but in memory. Long ago, someone said stars were the eyes of ancestors, watching to make sure no one gets lost. If that's true, Sigrid thinks, they are very patient eyes. She begins to drift, and in that soft space between waking and sleep, she thinks she hears the boat speak. Not in words, not truly, but in feeling. She imagines it sailing through a black sea under starlight, no oars, no sail, just movement. A quiet current pulling it gently, without fear. She imagines sitting in it. No one calling her back. No shore ahead, just the night, and peace. Bjorn twitches once in his sleep. He frowns, then relaxes. Maybe he's chasing a fox through a hill of clouds. Maybe the bear from his father's dream has returned, not to threaten, but to walk beside him. Whatever it is, it stays with him gently. His brow smooths again, and his mouth opens slightly, breathing in rhythm with the fading warmth of the fire. A timber beam creaks above, expanding or contracting, no one can say. The longhouse breathes too. The walls are not dead things. They are made of what once lived, pine and ash, reeds and wool, earth and water. They remember storms. They remember songs. Tonight, they remember this stillness. Far across the hills, an owl calls, low and clear. A reply echoes from somewhere deeper in the valley. Neither bird comes near the house. They know this is a place of sleep. Sigrid has drifted now, not quite dreaming, but not here, either. She sees a hillside in winter, covered in snow. She walks across it barefoot, but does not feel the cold. She carries something in her hands, a bowl, or a candle. Light spills from it, not blinding, just soft. She walks toward someone, but their face is lost in mist. She doesn't feel afraid. Bjorn shifts again and pulls the fur closer around his shoulders. The fire sighs once, a long exhale, then returns to its gentle hum. In the dark, time unravels. Not quickly, not all at once, but like thread slipping off a spindle. The boundaries between day and night dissolve. Between past and present, between breath and dream, the family sleeps. The house watches over them. So does the sea, just beyond the hills. So does the wind, curled in the grass. So do the stars, high and silent and constant. Sleep here is not escape. It is not the absence of life. It is part of it. A rhythm, like weaving, like rowing, like the tide. In, out, rest, return. One last coal glows in the hearth, pulsing red, then dimmer, then gone. No one sees it fade, but all feel its warmth, still held in the stones, still folded into the walls, still rising from beneath the firs, into the dreams of a boat builder and a girl who weaves. And the night, at last, settles fully, wrapped in moss, bound by stars, breathing softly, beneath the turf. The longhouse is still, but no longer deeply asleep. There's a shift in the air, subtle as breath. Outside, the sky begins to pale. Not blue, not gold, just the barest change, like a memory of light returning. It touches the turf roof first, melting dew into steam. It finds the doorway next, then the gaps in the beams, slipping inside like a gentle hand. The coals in the hearth are cold now, dark, silent. But not forgotten. Their mother wakes first. She always does. No alarm, no crowing rooster, just the quiet knowledge of time. A sense that the world has turned again, and it's time to rise with it. She moves slowly, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her feet make no sound on the floor. She kneels at the hearth and uncovers the small clay pot where yesterday's fire still sleeps, ash gray on the outside, but warm within. A breath, a blow, a cradling of spark in moss. A glow returns, tiny at first, a heartbeat, then larger, curling into flame. The first light of day is not the sun, but the hearth. And with it, the house begins to stir. Sigrid blinks awake. For a moment, she's not sure if it's still night. The sky outside is dim. The house is quiet, but there's a new warmth, not dream warmth, but fire warmth. She sits up slowly, hair mussed, furs still clinging to her shoulders. Her mother doesn't speak, she only nods, once, as Sigrid rubs her eyes and comes to kneel beside the flame. Together, they feed it, splinters first, then small logs, then the kettle of water, still warm from yesterday. Bjorn stirs next. He grumbles softly, half dreaming. But the crackle of flame, the soft scent of mint and birch from the kindling, these are his morning songs. He peeks from beneath the firs. Did it snow? Sigrid smiles. No, just morning. He yawns so hard his whole body curls, then crawls toward the fire, dragging his boat with him. Their father wakes last, stretching in one long motion and rising to stand in the low light. He doesn't speak, but places a log near the hearth and steps outside for water. The door opens to a hush of mist, pale, damp, cool. The sea air is gentler now, more breath than wind. Somewhere, a gull calls once, then falls quiet. Inside, the kettle begins to hum. The scent of barley from the storage pot mixes with the damp earth and rising fire. Another meal soon, like the one before, but never quite the same. Sigrid grinds a pinch of dried seaweed into a small bowl. Bjorn sets out the spoons without being asked. Their mother adds a twist of dried onion to the pot. No one speaks much. Mornings are not for stories. They are for doing. Together, in silence. The light grows bolder. A stripe of gold slips through the wall's cracks, landing across the floor like a ribbon. It touches Sigrid's knees, then Bjorn's shoulder, then vanishes again in the flicker of flame. The warmth of the hearth grows. Outside, the village wakes too. A voice calls faintly from somewhere beyond the house. A greeting, a child laughing, the creak of a door. The chickens cluck softly in the yard. The cowbell rings once as someone leads it toward the pasture. Another day begins. The same, and not. Their father returns with the water, setting the clay jug beside the fire. His hands are cold, his nose red. He doesn't complain. The kettle whistles. Breakfast is ready. They eat together again, the same way they always do. Bowls in hand, fire at their feet, no rush. Bjorn slurps, and their mother gently reminds him to breathe between bites. Sigrid sips slowly. She watches the fire reflect in her spoon. When the bowls are empty, no one rushes to rise. The day will come, the weaving, the errands, the carving and tending. But for now, there is stillness. The coals will be fed. The kettle will boil again. The herbs will be gathered and hung, dried and steeped, burned and remembered. Just as before, outside, the mist lifts. The hills beyond the village glow faintly green, with a dusting of dew. The sea beyond still breathes, slow and steady, its rhythm unchanged. The house remains, made of wood, earth, wool, memory. Inside it, a family. Not grand, not legendary, but woven together, day by day, with care and firelight and silence. The sun lifts, gold and sure. A new day begins. And so it continues.